Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday of week one. Today, I'm going to be talking about chapter one, Journalism Today, and kind of introducing you to some of the key concepts from the chapter, as well as additional points that I want you to know about the current media environment. So one of the key aspects of journalism today is technology. And a lot of times we think that journalism has completely changed because of technological advancements. But when you really think about it, journalists have always been on the forefront of technology, whether that was using the printing press for the first time, using the airwaves and radio, whether it was being on broadcast television or even cable television. Journalists are used to adapting to technology. So while our technological advancements in the digital era have completely changed, the fundamental skills of journalism remain the same regardless of the technology. Technology just provides different ways of gathering, organizing, presenting, and distributing information to our public. It tends to change the business model a great deal as well. And it does make journalism more important, especially in the digital age where information is overwhelmingly available to the public, but very difficult to understand and judge its accuracy. So journalism is starting to play a critical role in finding information that is accurate and truthful. We've seen a lot of new forms of journalism over the years. As I mentioned, we saw the press with the printing press and Gutenberg, the penny press and the newsboys era. We see radio come onto the scene, and then TV, both in broadcast and cable forms. And now we're seeing new forms of journalism in terms of digital journalism, web journalism, social media. And in recent years, we're seeing virtual reality, 360 reporting, and even beyond. So journalism does look very different day to day, but as I said before, those key skills remain the same. Here's an example of a 360 video project from Sky News. So I'm actually able to move what I see 360. So you can see I can add graphics. I can see all around, including what behind the scenes looks like. Here's the control room in Sky News. So this is just one example of the use of 360 technology in news. Perhaps even more striking is this video of the very first artificial intelligence anchor unveiled in China. So that's an anchor that is actually computer generated. Even though he may look human in some aspects, he's actually just a computer. And the words that he are saying are typed in by a journalist in China and then delivered through AI technology. So as I said, journalism looks very different depending upon the technology and the modality, but there are still critical skills that every journalist needs, regardless of the technology that's being used. Now, news use across America has changed drastically in the past few years. 75% of Americans still want daily news, though. And so journalism and news are increasingly important. In fact, I just read a study that suggested that during the time of the coronavirus, local news viewing actually skyrocketed because people were just in need of updated, accurate information. Most news users in America use 4 or 5 different sources of news each day. While there is declining use among younger generations like you, there is an increase in using multiple devices to get news, making multimedia journalism increasingly important. There is a diminishing trust in media sources, particularly news organizations. However, the trust that we place in journalists is still higher than the trust that we place on information that we get from social media. So you see that there are shifts in what kind of news people want, as you can see from the topic graph on the right, as well as how people are using news. And that really dictates news as business having to create new business models. Where does the organization make money? This is a question that journalism has dealt with for a long time. A lot of journalists see themselves as public servants, and yet journalism is an industry. It needs to make money in order to survive. Previously, organizations have had to use circulation, ratings, even social media analytics in order to make money, and some still do. However, businesses are having to diversify this by adding advertisements, not only within their publications or their newscasts, but also on their digital websites and social media platforms. In addition, 40% of millennials now pay for their news through subscriptions. And this is another way that business models of journalism has changed. So you always hear that a certain industry in journalism is dying. First it was the newspaper. Now people are talking about radio dying and even television news being dead. But I would argue, is news dying or just changing? Even from this picture that we see that was published by Pointer News a few years ago, they're predicting the death of newspapers. And yet the Los Angeles Times, USA Today, and the New York Times are still critical aspects of news as a business. They just change their business model and they practice convergence. Not only do they have a print publication, but they also have thriving digital publications and social media publications. And I think this convergence, this ability to practice multi-platform, multimedia journalism is going to be a critical skill for journalism today. The profession of news changes rapidly too, but some of the values and standards of our industry and profession remain the same. The truth, passion, authority, accuracy, ethics, curiosity, and storytelling. These are some of the key elements that journalists have to have, and they're some of the basic skills that I hope to instill in you within this class. We're also going to be talking about news judgment and news values, which are critical aspects of the profession, as well as grammar and style, which we'll be working on through our writing assignments. The ability to create content, those hard skills such as editing, videography, design, these things are becoming increasingly important for all journalists to learn, not just electronic news journalists. And the ability to work across platforms is also increasingly important in our profession. I wanted to give you an example from my life as a journalist. If I were covering a story about Birmingham City Council and that meeting ended at 11 a.m., here are the things that I would need to do before and during the meeting and the products that I would create for it after. Before the meeting, I'd have to plan, prepare, and research what was going on. I would have to attend the event, shoot video at a second location, and get sound with both council members and people who oppose the initiatives that are being proposed. During the meeting, I would be live tweeting that meeting to tell the public what was going on right in that moment. As I'm building the story, both during and after the meeting, I'd be verifying the information that they're telling, finding opposite views or opposing views to be able to balance out the story. I would need to write the story, edit the story, edit my videography, add graphics. On top of that, I'd also have to present the story, track my script, do a stand-up, do a live shot. So this is all the work that goes into a single story about a city council meeting. And from this one story, this one point of coverage that I'd be doing as a journalist, here would be the expectations of my work. For the noon newscast, for a story that ended at 11 a.m., I'd be expected to be going live and already have my story done and a video edited, as well as a tease to later stories later in the day. I would need to produce an entire package, a full minute 30 piece about the event for the 5 p.m. newscast, and then re-edit that story to become a live VOSOT, a video with interviews for 6 o'clock. I would also have to record versions of both the packages, the VO, and the VOSOT for the 10 p.m. newscast, as well as the next day's morning newscast. On top of that, I'd be doing social stories for Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I would need to make a website version of my story and embed my video, and then come up with stories as follow-ups for the very next day. Did I mention that journalists are also expected to do about 2 to 3 stories every day, each of them involving all of this work and output? This is what the life of a modern journalist is like, and it can be very difficult. And it's made even harder by the fact that most journalists are having to work from home during COVID. Here's a few laughs that we can joke about since it's not us. I will post that full blooper reel for you on the module week, but let's just say the life of a modern journalist is increasingly difficult. But the competencies and the skills that you need to be a journalist remain the same. This pyramid of journalism competence from Poynter really talks about some of the key skills that journalists need to have, but those cornerstones, the things that no journalist can work without, are judgment and evidence. Judgment is deciding what's important, what stories to cover, recognizing what stories the public needs to know. And evidence is what sets news apart from entertainment or opinion pieces. It's gathering and sharing evidence of public interest and value that might not be uncovered otherwise. In addition, you need to be able to tell stories, to think critically, to understand numbers and facts, to do all of this through new technology, to be able to produce the messages in a multimedia version, to understand civics. So if you don't understand how our government works, please go take a political science class. It's an important skill for journalists. You need to understand how culture at large works, and then the mission and purpose, why you think journalism matters to society and the world, should guide the rest, the very top of the pyramid. We also need to have journalistic style, and this means that the way that we write and the way that we do our journalism stories has to follow a certain style and guide. This is why we will focus so heavily at the front end of the semester on AP Style Book. I'll also teach you a lot of the jargon about the business. For instance, when I was talking about VOSOTs and packages, you may not have understood what I was talking about, because we use a lot of jargon and terms in the industry that set journalists apart from everyday writers. In addition, you'll need to know how to edit your copy, edit your story to be able to fit into the formatting of the newspaper or newscast. And then you'll have to understand the different formats for each of the multimedia platforms. All of these things are things that I hope to teach you throughout the semester. So now that we understand what journalism today looks like, here are the next steps for the module. Watch the PBS feature on Journalism Today. It's only about 8 minutes, but it has some great interviews with journalists about how technology and current developments in the field are affecting the industry. Then I want you to do your discussion post with your original post and replying to two peers on theirs. Watch the editing symbols video and do the reading, and review the two assignments that are due both at midterm and at the end of the semester. And finally, make sure you read chapter 2 by Friday. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.